Hello! In this video we're going to learn about the grammatical rules of the logical language. So in our previous video we learned about complex conditionals and parentheses. Now we're going to learn about grammatical rules, and which are basically going to be rules about how parentheses work, and we're going to need to talk about briefly about something called official and informal notation. So let's get going. We are going to lay out some rules for our logical language. First thing we want to do is say what the symbols are. So we're going to have capital letters from P through Z. Those are the sentence letters. We call those atomic sentences because they do not contain any other sentences. We have the arrow, which is the conditional sign, and then we're going to have parentheses, the left parenthesis and the right parenthesis. We're going to be adding more symbols actually starting next module, so we're going to be able to do more than just say stuff with conditionals. If we were just doing conditionals, this course would be over fairly soon. But we're doing a lot more than that. But this is just to get going. We're going to expand the language. So grammatical rules. So these are rules for which things are sentences. They don't tell us what the sentences mean or whether or not they're true. They're just rules that say which things are sentences and which aren't. So if I were to say if I were to say, let's see, Bob glass green, that's not a sentence. That's just 3 words, right? Whereas if I say Bob likes the green glass, then I've said a sentence. So similarly, we have rules for which things are sentences, which combinations of pieces of our language are sentences and which ones aren't. And they're simple. Every sentence letter, so all the capital letters from P through Z, those are all sentences. And then if you have 2 things that are sentences, box and circle, if you put an arrow down and you put circle on one side, box on the other, and surround them with parentheses, then you also have a sentence. That's a conditional sentence, right? And then finally, nothing else is a sentence. That's it and that's all. So pretty simple. When we add more symbols beyond the arrow, we're going to add a negation sign and a sign that means and. We're going to get grammatical rules for how they work as well. But this is it for our language as it stands. Very simple. Very short. Just every sentence letter is a sentence, and if you have things that are already sentences, if you put an arrow between them and parentheses around them, then you have a new sentence. So that's it. And why do we have parentheses? As we saw in the previous video, we use them to avoid ambiguities. Because we're forming sentences using these parentheses when we're building them up to build the sentences, we're never going to have an ambiguous sentence. That might not be totally obvious to you, and in fact, in a way, it shouldn't be obvious to you. It's something we could go improve if we were going to spend the time. We're not going to, but it is true. We have these parentheses to avoid all ambiguities. And that's a nice aspect of our language. So natural language, the languages that we're able to learn just as humans, as part of our human psychology, part of human nature, have grammatical ambiguities in them. What's an example? So there's this sentence, enraged cow injures farmer with axe. This sentence is ambiguous, not because of what it has multiple meanings. And that's not because of multiple meanings of any of the words, but because of how with axe is working. So one way we might read this sentence is there's a farmer and they have an axe, and this farmer with an axe, they were injured by the enraged cow. That's what it says. But it could be read differently. It could say, no, the farmer, they were injured by the enraged cow. And how? Well, the enraged cow used an axe to injure the farmer. With axe, that phrase is ambiguous. Is it the farmer that has the axe, or is it the injuring that's done with the axe? Well, the sentence can be read either way. And that's not because of the meanings of the words, but because of how the phrase with axe has been written there. Don't know. And that's a newspaper headline. And newspaper headlines actually have these a lot because they try to drop a lot of language and so on. Or something that might be close to home for us, closer to home in this class, my team loses only if my team plays poorly, only if I'm happy. They're two conditional phrases, only if there, but how do they fit together? Well, could be put together in lots of different ways, 2 different ways. And so that is grammatically ambiguous. We want a language without grammatical ambiguity, so we don't have to worry about it. So our sentences wear their grammar on their sleeves, and the parentheses are what do that for us. Okay, but this thing I've said about parentheses might strike you as a little bit weird because look, for the first couple modules, we were had conditional sentences without parentheses, and now we're saying those aren't sentences. Right, this, P arrow Q, there are no parentheses there. According to our rules, it's not a sentence of our language because we only have 2 kinds of sentences. We have sentence letters, P, Q, R, and so on. And then we have conditionals, but for it to be a conditional sentence, you have to have parentheses around you, and this doesn't have parentheses, and so actually it's not a sentence. Well, it's not a sentence according to those rules, and we're going to say if you're a sentence according to those rules, then you're a sentence of official notation. But to make our lives easier, we're going to say we're still going to call this a sentence. We're going to call it a sentence of informal notation. So what do we mean by official and informal? Well, we're going to have rules that let us drop parentheses. And right now we have just one. When you have built up a sentence, and when you're totally done building it, then you can, if it has parentheses around it, as it's going to for right now, then you can drop them. Drop the external pair of parentheses. Only the external pair, but you can drop those. So if you don't drop if you build a sentence up and then don't drop the parentheses, that's official notation. So that's parenthesis, P arrow Q parenthesis. But if you drop the parentheses, then it's in informal notation. So let's just look at some examples of this to finish up our video here. So official parenthesis, P arrow Q parenthesis, right? You take two things that are already sentences, P and Q, put an arrow between them, put parentheses around the whole thing, you have another sentence, great, following the rules. In informal notation, we say build it up, that way fine, but then drop that last pair of parentheses, and we just have P arrow Q. Or we could have said, okay, well, let's take Q and R, put them together, put the arrow between them, parentheses around them, and once we have that, then let's put take P and put an arrow between P and the complex sentence we put, and then put parentheses around the whole thing. So if P, then, if Q, then R. Okay, good. So it's official. It's got all those parentheses. Informal lets us drop the outside pair. And we could do it the other way around. We had if P, then Q, then R, and we can drop the external pair of parentheses. So that's informal. So it's pretty straightforward, and that's what we need to know about official and informal, and how we've said what the grammatical rules of our language are. So good, we've got those concepts down, and that's what we were looking to learn with this video.